Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Ghosts in Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the SMG buffs that went live yesterday afternoon. This is kind of tying into the episode that I did last week. Those buffs have finally gone live. They're live on the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PC, and they will be available on the Xbox 360 and Xbox One soon, but they're getting updated a little bit later. In this episode, we're going to go over the stats of each and every buff and their implications, but I've got a few announcements to make first. Number one is that I'm recording from my hotel room at the Call of Duty Champs right now. I'm not at home. I'm using my travel mic on my travel laptop, and my hotel room is right next to the air conditioning unit for the whole floor, right next to the jacuzzi where all the pro players are, and I'm also at LAX, so there's airplanes flying all over. If there's a lot of background noise, I apologize. This is a time where I literally just have no control over it. The gameplay that you're seeing right now is from Hub. Again, I'm not at home, but he was kind enough to throw in some Bizon gameplay for you all to, enjoy. Also, thank goodness, the Ask Drifter Ghost app has finally been approved by Apple, and it's live in the iTunes store. I've been fighting really hard for you guys to get this live on iPhone, iOS, iPad, all the Apple devices. It's been live on Android for a couple of weeks, but it's finally live on iOS. So if you click the first link in the description, it will actually take you to the page where it is in the iTunes store this time. I promise. It works. There were 5 total buffed SMGs. Not all of them were buffed. The Vector, VEPR, Bizon, CBJ, and K7 were all buffed in some fashion. They were all range buffs, technically. The Ripper and the MTAR have not been buffed at all. Those have been left totally alone. And if I'm slurring my words a little bit, I apologize. I haven't slept properly in a couple of days. It's busy here. The Bizon got an overall 35% range buff. This is the easiest one to understand. To understand the minimum damage range, which is your long distance damage, and your maximum damage range, which is your up close kind of drop off. The entire range profile got a 35% buff. This would be equivalent to putting 2 muzzle brakes on it, just stacking both of those on there, and you can still put muzzle brake on and increase it even more than this. So it got a really big overall range buff. Some of the other ones are a little bit more complicated. The most complicated buff was the CBJ MS. This got an overall damage profile change. It still retains the same numbers, the same shots to kill. However, it got a 35% increase in maximum damage range. That means it has 35% extra range before it starts dealing less. Its 3-shot kill range is now 35% further out, and it got a massive 60% buff in its minimum damage range. It used to hit its minimum damage very quickly. It was a lot like a shotgun, kind of worthless in my opinion. It got a really big buff in that minimum damage range. It's got a completely different damage profile, and it is much more competitive with the other SMGs. A lot of you kind of looked at it as the joke SMG, the bullet hose, the one if you just hate shotguns but you want to spray people. It's now a lot more like the old Bizon used to be, except it's got built-in AP rounds and some other nice things. The Vector got a 25% increase in its minimum damage, or its overall maximum range. It's now more competitive with the MTAR. The 3-shot kill range has not been changed. The profile has only changed slightly for the in-between areas, but its maximum range was buffed so that it has a slightly more competitive 4-shot kill range to keep up with the MTAR. The K7 also got a 25% minimum damage range increase. The K7 was a lot like the Bizon, the CBJ in the way that it hit its minimum very quickly. It was a very low damage SMG. This one kind of bumps it up, makes it a little bit more competitive. I personally thought the K7 was competitive to begin with because it had a built-in suppressor which kept me off the radar, but it truly did struggle at long ranges. This will help your more medium range combat be acceptable, but long range is still going to be very difficult. Last up, the VEPR also got a 32% minimum damage range buff, very similar to the K7 and the Vector buffs, but just a little bit stronger. The overall effects of this buff are such that the Bizon and the CBJ are much stronger. The Bizon and CBJ have been almost totally reworked from a functional perspective, so they're much more competitive with the MTAR and the VEPR and the other submachine guns and the Ripper now. I would suggest you try out the new Bizon. I think that might be a new go-to SMG. And also the CBJ, I'm not sure if it's going to be the new SMG, but it is definitely going to be a much better SMG. The Vector, VEPR, and K7 only got long-range improvements, meaning that the developers were pretty comfortable with how they were before, but felt that they kind of suffered in the long range and engagements, which is largely what Call of Duty Ghosts is. However, they have improved in that, so it's a more minor buff for these weapons. And again, the MTAR X and the Ripper, being the most popular and most prevalent two submachine guns, did not get buffed. They were left untouched. This was kind of to make SMGs more competitive, because really only people were only using the MTAR and the Ripper, and a little bit more competitive with assault rifles in general. I think it's a good idea. I think it was a good thing. SMGs are now viable, or they will be more viable. I'm here doing competitive Call of Duty stuff, so I think you might see them a little bit more in competitive Call of Duty, and probably a little bit more in pub stomping as well. Well, guys, that's all for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, even though I can clearly tell my commentary is a little bit zonked out. I'm going pretty hard over here at the COD Champs. If you'd like to check out the previous episode, that is going to be on the LSAT light machine gun. And if you'd like to check out the next episode, that's another secret. We're working on some really interesting stuff, and I can't really announce these because then people will kind of get on to what I'm working on and beat me to it, and I don't want to do that. But I've got good in-depth coming up for you. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.